阿根廷攻勢依然旺盛，可惜夏里拉做敗家仔啊，攤凍嚟食都搞唔掂。你搞唔掂啊！中國隊話等我嚟攻，黃勝遠射被拍出不遠，馬爾嘅頭槌又俾阿根廷門將路斯再度擋到。眼見勢色唔對啊，中國隊立即換入已經入選過大國腳嘅前鋒曲波，加強攻力。呢招果然奏效，曲波入場唔夠1分鐘，喺右路空晒，鬥過出營嘅門將為中國隊追成1-1平手。賽前佢喺件底衫度寫定中國勝利，呢真係有啲用噃。不過要數中國隊今場嘅最佳球員，就非門將安琪莫屬。對方盧馬洛利嘅快腳施射又被救出，卒之去到63分鐘，實力係高過中國隊嘅阿根廷再度超前。高洛仙尼嘅頭槌仲未彈出，杜明基斯快人一步射咗個波入網。阿根廷終於亦都係以2-1呢個比數擊敗中國，入到世星杯嘅8強。
Seriously injuring both officers. A female officer just behind the two men escaped injury. This road construction worker said he heard shots and saw the officers on the ground, but since there were many people at the time, he said he important areas. Authorities sealed off parts of Mongkok, including Waterloo Road and Peace Avenue, as well as nearby Shantung and Yinpo Feng streets, where the suspects were
freedoms, whoever is on it.
Amy. Thank you, Louise. Now, Yangshuo is another must-see spot besides from Guilin. Now, here you can also see hills of different shapes, but without the hustle and bustle of Guilin. This scenic beauty is also printed on the 20 yuan note. Now, below those hills runs Lijiang, the river that connects Guilin and here. Now, the water seems quite clear right now, but not so some 20 years ago, when industries on both sides of the river heavily polluted its water. Described by Chinese as the most beautiful spot in the world, Guilin is renowned both locally and overseas. But few visitors would know that this place was heavily polluted in the 80s.
当时呢，我们邓小平同志到桂林漓江来就说了，你还我美好河山，功不抵过，漓江的发展功不抵过。
1.6 million people joined sightseeing tours along the Lijiang, the river connecting Guilin with another famous sport, Yangshuo. To control water pollution, all food must be washed before being brought on board, so the dirty water doesn't go into the river. Right now, trees are everywhere on both sides of the Lijiang, but some 10 years ago, trees could barely be seen, as a lot of them had been cut down to facilitate farming. The government also regulates domestic sewage to keep the river clean. All domestic waste from Guilin has to be diverted to the 4 sewage treatment plants in the city. And 30 heavily polluting industries built on the riverbank will have to relocate. Although black smoke billowing out of chimneys can seldom be seen in Guilin, it still exists in other parts of Guangxi. The sulfur emitted from the burning of coal causes acid rains and threatens to make 40% of the land in the province arid.
这是可以说也是一个教训，在这个教训来讲，对不对？有些就是也太轻重。
He says in the past, people thought that they could develop the economy first and treat pollution later. But now this mentality has to be changed, and both development and environmental protection should be seen as equally important. Like most Western provinces and regions, parts of Guangxi are heavily struck by poverty. But the irony is, the place where the late Chinese leader Deng Xiaoping started an uprising hasn't benefited and still remains poor. Surrounded by mountains, the Baise area is virtually enclosed. Because of its isolation, the late Chinese leader Deng Xiaoping led the Red Army here 72 years ago to fight against the Kuomintang. In the hope of improving the livelihood, poor peasants here joined Deng in the fight. Today, the people here remain poor. 2 million farmers struggle to feed their families. Old Mr. Liu thinks he's better off than a few years ago, but in this harsh environment, most people still have to fight with plows. The central government built water storage containers to improve life here. But a water storage problem still exists. And with a shortage of lowland and fertile soil, farmland is scarce. Farmers can only grow maize in between rocks to earn a living. In the central government's plan to develop Western China, residents are encouraged to move to places with a more hospitable environment. But many are reluctant to leave the land where their ancestors have lived for generations.
Half made by a Russian general. Another senior officer called Budanov scum and promised he'd be dealt with harshly. A year later, though, the Kungayev family are still waiting, still hungering for justice. The case has finally come to court, but in a town 2 days' train ride. The next generation of young Cossacks practicing the military skills they'll need to carry on the old traditions. Whoever isn't on Russia's side, they're taught, is Russia's enemy. The adults who teach them are ambivalent about Chechnya, in public at least. But there's no doubt they believe a fellow Russian soldier like Budanov wouldn't lie. They accept his story that Kheda Kungayev was a Chechen sniper. They say she killed several of his men. It's Budanov's word as an officer against that of a Chechen family.
The court must decide who's guilty. As far as we Cossacks are concerned, Budanov is not guilty. It's a pity about the girl, but war is war, and he was a warrior.
As the Kungayev's train arrives just before dawn, after 2 long days' journey to Rostov-on-Don, they know this week in court won't be easy. It's been a year of darkness for the family, but at least their chance to speak out has finally come. Outside the court, though, a hostile reception awaits. The trial is being held here because this is the military district in charge of Chechnya. The Cossacks and Russia's far-right wing, with their neo-Nazi regalia, are demonstrating for Budanov's freedom. His support among both the military and ordinary Russians has grown over the past year. This man says Budanov is a Russian patriot who took good care of his men. He tells me Kheda Kungayev was clearly a terrorist who'd killed at least 11 Russian soldiers. Whatever happens in the courtroom over the next few days, this trial has already exposed the deep divides within Russian society. A small minority believes that the Russian army should be punished for their crimes in Chechnya. But a vocal majority, including the demonstrators here, believe that Colonel Budanov deserves a medal and not a prison sentence for his actions in Chechnya. The colonel himself has shown little remorse. He was, he said, simply doing his duty. Inside the court, caged like an animal, he sits only a few meters away from Kheda's family. They hope to learn exactly how and why she died. If it's found that Colonel Budanov murdered her in cold blood, he could face life imprisonment. But if the judges believe he killed Kheda...
The US cents. With that, we can buy some rice. They sell to middlemen in the garbage trade. People like Arcadio Briones, who's made a living out of the bags of garbage the people bring in, and who now faces closure.
Obviously, for us, we don't want to lose the garbage because it's been our livelihood. It's helped to put my kids through high school, and I want to put them through college, too. But I won't be able to do that if we don't have the money.
Arcadio's shop overlooks the scene of last year's landslide tragedy at Payatas. The slippage of a mountain of garbage onto the shanty homes of those making a living from it claimed several hundred lives, with many of their bodies still buried here. That tragedy prompted government action, resulting in today's recycling solutions, working on the basis that modern-day garbage has commercial value if local authorities can be forced to segregate it.
Because you have factories who are willing to buy this